Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the City Podcast, the Stay in True to Yourself podcast. I'm your host here, Tex Wambui, and today we have another amazing topic that I'm very passionate about, and we definitely need to develop more conversation on this. And I have the pleasure of having a special person join on today's podcast episode, and they have already been on an episode before, and we had a really interesting conversation before. And today we're about having another interesting one. So I'm gonna let Hussein Waiyaki introduce himself so everybody out there knows who he is.
Uh, thank you, Tex. Well, I think I'm not very new here, but for those who don't know me, my name is Hussein Waiyaki from Nairobi, Kenya. Mm, yeah, brief introduction.
Yeah, you're in Kenya.
Yeah,
I'm in the United States at the moment. So it's awesome how we can connect and do this episode.
yeah,
So today, you know what the topic is going to be about, right?
yeah, sure.
We're going to be talking about electricity, electrification in Kenya. So before we start getting into the questions I have and everything, you want to give people kind of a glimpse of, or like a synopsis of the situation when it comes to electricity access and digital equity in the country of Kenya and in sub-Saharan Africa overall.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I'll speak specifically to Kenya because I mean, there's a different level of electrification in different countries in Africa. Like, let's talk for instance, Egypt, they have done 100%, they've done it 100%, whereas in Kenya, we're at around 75, 78%, if I'm not very wrong. So you see, there's different entry level for different countries when it comes to electrification in Africa. So in Kenya, well, I'd say we are not really bad off in as much as recently the authority, Kenya Power in this case, has been failing us terribly. But at 75, 78% for a developing country, we are not bad off. And that's an initiative that was done recently. I think between 2012 and 2023 is when. Before 2012, we were at around 35%, if I'm not wrong, with almost zero electrification to the rural interiors. But after 2020, after 2012, there was that initiative for electrification of each and every schools, including the interior schools and the rural schools. And that's what saw a sudden change in electrification. Although we are not yet there because I believe we have the capacity of doing it 100% and even do an, you know, external power supply after we sustain ourselves. So yeah, that's the situation as it is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know there's a project that was done and an initiative which was the Kenya National Electrification Strategy, and then also the Kenya National Energy Policy. Um, and I've been really doing a lot of research on this actually, because as I'm writing my capstone paper for my graduate studies,
Yeah,
and this is a topic I've chosen to write about because I want to bring that sense of awareness and a stimulation of opportunities to open to the country of Kenya for the purpose of growth in providing electricity. And the reason for this, I would say, for me, that I think electrification is very important. As you said, schools, by electrifying schools, it allows for a large set of areas to be electrified as well. If you can electrify schools, you can electrify hospitals, banks, corporations. And I think that would definitely allow for solving the whole problem of digital equity. So because digital equity is also another aspect. You can't tell people they need internet, but you can't have internet without electricity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And also, the different forms of energy sources that Kenya has available to it. I know that it uses at least 41% geothermal, 16% wind, 30% hydro, and a few others. And I know they had a really big solar initiative that they implemented. But now, if we're gonna think about solar, you gotta think about solar as well as the opportunity cost that comes with solar. Is it is it in the long run cheap? Because it's really expensive disposing those solar panels if you think about it, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, as someone that is living in Kenya, what would you say are the current challenges or barriers faced in achieving the widespread electrification across Kenya?
Well, to begin with, I believe Kenya has the capacity. If we could do from 35% to around 7 to 8% in a span of around 10 years, I
Yeah.
believe Kenya can really do its 100% electrification. And again, we are blazed with natural energy sources. Like you said, 41% is geothermal. We have
Mm-hmm.
around 16, 17% wind. And actually, I was actually reading recently and I realized the 16% wind production is around 56% tapped wind. That means we still have around 44 unused wind, which can still be used to produce some electricity.
Yeah.
But if I have to talk of the challenges, I think as a developing country that is still scrambling with its leadership, its establishment, authorities, and whatnot, number one challenge is corruption. Like, I don't know if you've heard recently of some people from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport getting fired because there were no fuel for generator when electricity went off. So we have the question of corruption, which is a really big deal because when it comes to tenders and supply, when it comes to starting from the production itself, to the supply of the electricity, to the grid connectivity and whatnot. There's a lot of corruption going on, and actually, there's another recent instance where a member of counter assembly had illegally, quote unquote, connected himself, and the Kenya power were on his neck, and he actually had used his money to do the post and whatnot to connect to his rural home because the rural home doesn't have electricity. So there's the question of corruption, which is a big deal. It's a cut across thing because seems like all of us, not just in electrification, in everything, in every aspect in Kenya, there's that question of corruption. I was, I really thought we are not bad off in corruption until recently. If I read somewhere that we are the fourth corrupt country in Africa. So that's number one. Number two, I think we need some really good policies and regulations that will guide the electrification in Kenya, which is also pegged on, you know, the aspect of goodwill on leadership. It also again gets us back to the corruption aspect because lack of goodwill gets us corrupt, and we formulate some unfavorable or some kind of irrelevant regulations and policies that doesn't favor us all. But at least we tried. I mean, 78% from my case, and we have almost 100% rural school electrification, of course, 100% urban. We have 100% rural medical centers electrification, which opened also for electrification in the rural town setups. So, in as much as we have the challenges of corruption and poor policing and kind of bad leadership and governance, even when it comes to authority levels, we have really tried our best to see Kenya electrified.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting that you say corruption is kind of the thing that is holding Kenya back when it comes to advancing and providing electricity to its people. So now, how do you think you can address? What do you think can be used to address that level of corruption? Because as you said, if you have people who are in cabinet who are now using their power to generate electricity for themselves, but not for the people that they represent, how do you solve that?
I mean, it's a really, really challenging situation, Tex. And I don't know, maybe prayers. And it's so unfortunate. I was speaking to someone who were having a conference recently about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and
Yes.
the Vision 2030. And and actually, the guy was from SDG Africa. He actually lives in the United States, if I'm not wrong. He told me in Kenya, if you're a citizen of goodwill, the best thing you can do is to get your passport ready and leave. I don't believe in that because I believe we really need to fix this country. And maybe step by step with the few citizens of goodwill who are willingly ready, like I am. I told you the other day when we were doing the other episode, my purpose is justice, and if I have to die, so as I see, so as to see justice come through, then so be it. So if we really get just a few citizens of goodwill who are willingly ready to fix this country, then we'll be moving in the right direction. But right now, I can't really tell because starting from political leadership is everything as insofar as economic development of a country or a region is concerned. If you have you see like in Rwanda, Kagame came to political power and he has fixed almost 100% of the Rwanda's economy. So we really need a goodwill in political leadership to see us coming through, so that even when we formulate regulations and policies and laws about how we should deal with corruption, we should have no mercy to anybody or any perpetrator of corruption. But right now, I mean, we have some good legal working system, but it seems like the corrupt individuals are above the laws, and the law can only catch with the small fish.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the corruption aspect. That it's definitely been something that is impacting the growth of some African countries, and just not African countries, just as the world in general. People are, it's that self interest, and they forget the reason of why they're in certain positions. And I definitely, what do you think about like foreign direct investment? Because you're in Kenya, I'm in the United States. How do you think that relationship and that those relationships can be used in developing and kind of guiding the elimination of corruption for the purpose of maybe ensuring that we can have electrification there? Because I know the USA does a lot of investment into the sustainability of Kenya. There's the UNICEF, United Nations, and all those organizations that push for the SDG goals, Vision 2030. But now, are the people who are in Kenya willing to collaborate and actually push for growth, or are they? Do you think they're more complacent and they just want to be stagnant?
Well, even when we talk of foreign investments and and welcoming the foreign investment into our country, it's not lost in us that we have regulations and policies that guides. We have the diplomatic regulation that guides the foreign investments, and I normally say in Kenya we have very nice laws. We have good policies. We are good at making the policies that looks like they can work for us. But when it comes to implementation, you know, we are short of, something goes wrong. And if we talk of foreign investment, we've had enough foreign investment really takes. We have Chinese all of us right now. We've had Indian time immemorial. We've had the United States, coming through. We've had a lot of foreign investment, but now even the foreign investment, with foreign investment, there's a certain guide and protocols on basis of diplomacies between, you know, country to country. And even that you realize we have some nice regulations on paper, but when it comes to implementation, again it's again guided by corruption. Like it's corruption all over. And now the only thing that hails us, it's corruption. Like if we can really fix that question of corruption, that then everything works for us. The electrification, foreign investment. Because actually, I was passing through just by around where I live in Limuru, and I realized like we have around four schools who are owned by foreign investors. But now, if you do some analysis and hear the stories of how they got the license, how they were taken through some, kind of routes, and they have to see someone somewhere for them to, get the process through. It's really sad. Like in Kenya, if we can really fix the question of corruption, then I believe we can be at same level with the United States, or if not, just somewhere close there. Because I hear from stories that we were at same level with Singapore sometimes back around 1980s. I don't know where the rain started beating us.
Yeah, the one thing though I would say, yeah, corruption is definitely a big problem, but it's not that corruption doesn't exist everywhere else in the world, even though it might seem everything's going good. Even in the United States, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of corruption that goes on. Pretty sure in all of the countries in the world, there's a sense of corruption that goes on. So it is inevitable that corruption definitely will always be there. But now I definitely do agree with what you're saying. It's going to take um, certain leaders and certain people to be in certain positions to actually implement and do the things that they're actually saying they're going to do for the better of the people, because that's the point of the government, is to not exploit the people you're representing, but it's to provide a system of collective agreements and collective work for furthering and bettering the society that we live in. But it's still gonna. I definitely do think it's going to be very inevitable. Corruption is inevitable within any government system. It's just that how much can you minimize it? That's the kind of the thing. And at what level do you need to start minimizing it at to eradicate all the impact it has on the mass of the people? So like now going back to like electrification, right? And we see that corruption is, a big thing it's a big barrier to advancing and implementing initiatives or anything like that. So now, can you do you have how does electrification impact like the various aspects of life in Kenya, like such as education, healthcare, and economic development? What would you say um, the lack of electrification is impacting?
Well, before I come to your question of how does lack or presence of electrification impact life in Kenya, let me get back a little bit on the aspect of corruption. You see, corruption is inevitable. It's almost everywhere in the world. I concur. But now you see, there are countries which have established systems to that working for the citizen. Like in the United States, there are certain corrupt elements. I agree. But now, what happens to them when they are caught in the corruption cases? That's what matters. Here in Kenya, in my beloved country, an MP is found corrupt and he goes to the president, and they have a tete-a-tete, and the other thing you hear is cases withdrawn. Now if the system doesn't work for the citizen, what do you expect? That person is going to steal more, probably bribe more, and everything. Now, to your question on the impact of electrification, I mean, I'd say electricity is the center bolt of every other developmental aspect of humanity, of modernity, as we speak right now. We couldn't be doing this podcast without electricity because
Exactly.
electrifies.
Exactly.
Yeah. So electricity stands at it all. And the more electrification you have, the more the better chances of development in all arenas, in all developmental aspects, like in education. Since we did the 100% electrification in Kenya, right now we've seen improvement in electrification. There was that project which was supposed to be done for advancing technologies in basic academic institution like primary and high school, whereby they were supposed to get some laptops and tablets, which,
Is that the Kenya off grid solar project?
yes,
Yeah.
which, like, I think the Kenyan government had a really tough time because as at then we were not
It
good
was.
off in terms.
It's the one that was financed by the World Bank, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see, in terms of education, we need electricity. Right now, we are moving from the paper study to electronic device studies. So you need electrification all over. In terms of industrialization, you need electrification. Like, I generally say electrification is is a
Foundation.
centrifuge, or is the foundation, is the basis beyond which we get all this development in social, in economy, you know, industrialization, in education, in technological advancement, in transport, and all that. And see, all those areas of life are where we invest in and, get what we get in return.
Yeah.
So
And
electricity is everything. And
I.
if even when you go to a little back to the ancient time, they had their own ways of generating power too, because power,
Yes.
power is, you know,
Yeah. I definitely. Um. Electricity definitely does bridge that gap of digital equity, and in the pursuit of equitable education and technology accessibility in Kenya, the electrification of schools emerges as a very, very significant thing. Because electrification of educational institutions, including primary schools, secondary schools, even universities, is very fundamental to the conducive learning environment, which enhances now the digital literacy. Because as we we'll go back to the basic thing of technology. As the rate of technology increases, the rate of productivity increases, and there has actually been research that shows when places that have higher access to electricity, they have a higher likelihood of having more income. So now, if you look at people in Kenya with the income compared to another country that has more electricity access, you can also see the disparity there when it comes to the amount of money people can make with and without electricity. And definitely providing that modern access to these as you said, modernity of things that is developing every day. And, while Kenya has definitely made commendable strides in expanding electricity access, through direct foreign direct investment, by developing these projects and initiatives, I definitely do agree. Back to what you were saying, the aspect of corruption is definitely holding them back, and also which leads to now that substantial gap that is creating that lack of electrification, particularly in remote and underserved areas. Because Nairobi City, right? I'm pretty sure Nairobi City is pretty electrified, but
yeah,
you'll still find people in Nairobi that don't have electricity,
yeah,
which is very sad because it's an urban city.
very sad indeed.
Very sad. And then now, a funny thing, I was actually thinking about this the other day. Mombasa, to us as Kenyans, we see Mombasa as like it's a vacation place or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever seen Mombasa on a travel document? I have never
Actually,
seen.
actually, Mombasa is one of the collapsing cities as we are talking.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I don't really know what the government is doing about it, but Mombasa is on a downward trajectory. In fact, as we speak right now, Mombasa is it's like a motor hub. It's like a car show city where the only business that hails there is car because of the Kilindini Port Harbour. And the moment the cars are transported up country, I mean, Mombasa has nothing to offer save for the seawater that we go enjoy on vacations.
Exactly. And I also when you look at the accessibility of electricity in Mombasa, it's very limited. So that is also, I feel like by generating electricity to certain areas like that can definitely also have an impact on the economic growth for the country of Kenya as well. Considering that Mombasa is definitely it's a port that offers a lot of products to the country. Like most of the things that probably go into Kenya, most of them go through Mombasa, right? And
Yes,
I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm like, I've seen so many other places that are beach areas, like Zanzibar. There are all these places, right? They have a tourist appeal. I've never seen Mombasa on a tourist brochure, and now it's if you look at it, they don't have electricity. Why would tourists want to go to places that don't have electricity, or they have limited access to modern technology stuff? So those by I think by that aspect of electrifying Kenya to 100% will definitely propel the country forward. And we do have to consider the geographical landscape and the implementation of these projects, like the project we were just talking about. The was it the Kenya Off Grid Solar Project?
yes.
Um, was it the COSAP? So the Kenya Off Grid Solar Project. From my understanding, it was an initiative by the Ministry of Energy, which was financed by the World Bank, right? And it was supposed to bridge the gap of providing electricity and clean cooking solutions in traditionally underserved regions of Kenya. Um, and it was a standalone solar home systems to provide energy access for community facilities and capacity building stuff. And also, it allows for local employment. So that's another aspect I definitely think of when it comes to electrification. By pushing Kenya to electrify itself more every day, it definitely allows for also the development of jobs. Because when you create a demand for a certain product, you need workers who are going to be supplying that service or what it is. It opens the market to having electricians. All those things play a role into the macro aspect of the country's economic outlook. Um,
I,
and as a matter of fact, I was reading too about that project, which I'm thinking about including it in my paper. There was an allocation of 25 million from the COSUP's budget for community facilities and relevant to the aspect of school electrification. So by electrifying community centers, which in return has kind of an impact as well as how schools also have an impact to a community. So that was a very interesting thing. And I definitely think, projects like that are definitely needed. But I feel like for them to have a long lasting, impactful um, effect and impact, the aspect of corruption for sure is definitely needs to be minimized to a level that it is not visible to the clear eye. Because if the clear eye citizen can see corruption right there in front of them, then that is not okay. So, and I
actually
definitely
to back you up, there's just another day, I think less than a month ago, we had a total blackout all over the country.
yeah, you were telling me about that.
And actually, the Minister for Trade came out and said because of the total blackout, we lost 2 billion Kenyan shillings in the economy because I'd say like 90% plus of the economy relies on electrification. Like, yesterday we had a slight hours of power blackout and I passed by the supermarket and they tell me, we can't operate, we don't have power. I'm like, wow, when are we doing this podcast so that I say that? I mean, if a supermarket loses his customer because I wouldn't really be seated there waiting for electricity to pop so that I can be served at a supermarket. I don't even know when and at what time. So you see, that supermarket loses some kind of investment income. And that's just one example. We have some cyber caves. We have like almost every other business right now relies on electricity for its day-to-day operations. So, and again, back on the question of Mombasa, like in Mombasa, when you told me about your study, I started getting interested in, the major city. And I realized actually Mombasa has almost 35% places that are not electrified, and it's actually a city. If you go to
Man,
places
and that's where we
Junda,
were born, man. Oh.
if you go to places like Junda, which is actually within Mombasa Island, you realize there's a whole community set up without electricity. It's like a rural setup within an urban. It's not even a rural setup within an urban. It's like a rural setup within a city that doesn't have electricity. It's that place, man, is under development. They still live in, mud houses and whatnot. Like there's the school around there. I think it's almost 2+ kilometers from the community setup. And I'm like, wow. I mean, this is not interesting. This is sad. I don't know what the government is doing about it because if you start making some follow-ups, you'll realize some, 1 billion or 10,000 million US dollars were allocated to electrify the place, but amid the way, you don't understand where they went.
Exactly. Corruption.
Like you always hear cases of, there was allocation of this to be done. Like there was the Aror Kimwerere Dam, which were also supposed to, better our power supply production, which some money went missing somewhere, and now you hear there are no cases. The perpetrators have no cases to answer because there is no sufficient evidence before the court. We have a lot of stories, and I think in Kenya we also have a list of good lawyers. I've started thinking that way recently because, I mean, nobody, since we started prosecuting the corruption cases, I've never had anybody convicted of corruption, really. I don't know if you've heard of one, but I live in Kenya, and sincerely speaking, I've had so many cases of, so and so is caught in a corruption scandal. There's this tender that went well, but of all the allegations and accusations that we hear every other day, I can dare say nobody has ever been convicted of corruption. And that's why I say the system are not set to work for the good of the citizens.
Yeah, I'm never actually thinking about it. I haven't heard of anybody convicted of corruption in Kenya. I've only heard of accusations, allegations, but I haven't heard about an actual conviction of it. Which maybe, yeah, it's definitely something we should definitely consider as a country of how we can, better serve to the public and not just to the people who are in certain positions. And now, and thinking about that aspect of that city you're talking about, makes all I think about is now the schools there, the people living there, the information they have available to them, the youth, the future generation. And then if you think about with electricity access, schools can enhance that digital literacy. It provides access to things that you don't have to go 100 miles for. You have accessibility to it right there. Um, and as a matter of fact, now when we were talking about Kenya with how it supplies its energy, right? Why are we having blackouts? that is now a question and something we need to figure out about the grid system that we have in Kenya. Either do we need to develop more microgrids to be able to sustain our grid system that is providing electricity, because blackouts don't really happen in areas that have 100% electricity. And also
I,
by diversifying your energy source, some from my understanding and knowledge is that it provides a sustainable and reliable grid system. Like what you just said, you went to the grocery store or to the supermarket, and you get there, they have no electricity, so they can't serve you. You can't get what you want. Now, what about another source of energy that could be used to electrify that place? And that is another thing that I think we definitely can should consider is how do we sustain our grid system to avoid these blackouts? Because if a blackout like that is making the economy lose that much money, that is a problem in the long run. How do you recover from that? So that's where I think this, developing a solution of developing a reliable grid system that does not have blackouts. And I will use an example. So over here in the United States, there was a blackout that happened in a winter. I think it was in Texas, and this winter went. It just came by, and it snowed a lot, and people's pipes were frozen. Things were done. People had blackouts. Now, that is a very major concern thing because that was an unexpected winter storm. But if you really think about it, if the grid system had a reliable source of energy to back it up when something like that happens,
yeah,
that would not have occurred. And this is where now I am now, so we are the future of our country and this world, right? What do you think about nuclear energy in Kenya becoming a big push for using nuclear energy? Because I know, what is it? There's a country that recently in Africa is developing nuclear energy plants to sustain their grid system, right? Isn't that, I think Russia is the one helping them develop it?
yeah. I think I don't know. I'm not very sure of the country, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of it. So some major general guy I heard about, but forgot the name. But what do you think about that nuclear energy? Do you think Kenya pushing for nuclear energy can kind of allow it to get to that 100% electrification?
Yeah, you see, we currently live in a world where we seek solutions day by day. We try to figure out things to come up with solution inventions and innovation that will solve the problems that we go through on a day-to-day basis. So, okay, as for me, if if nuclear energy investment in Kenya will bring us 100% plus electrification, that means there's every individual access to electricity and every utility access to electricity to every individual living in Kenya, then I mean, why not? Because if nuclear energy is coming to fill the gap of, power outage and the unelectrified places, so that we can have 100% electrification in Kenya, and now we can, fully explore the potential of the country at the national level and at individual level. I think that can be a really nice investment. Really, I mean, we need power. We need power, bro. Like, imagine popping into a supermarket and it can't operate because it can't afford generator fuel. It's quite expensive to run a generator, a power generator, because of the fuel that it consumes. So they tell you we can't run a generator fuel because it's quite expensive. We'll be running a loss and we don't have power. And that power goes for 24 good hours. That means that's a total day economy standstill. So if we can really invest in nuclear energy, and it's on record as one of the best, sources of good power, then I mean, and we solve our problem, then we are good to go. That means we have the so-called 24-hour economy. Now you choose when to sleep and when to wake up and go work because it's like a total daytime economy.
Yeah, yeah. And when you look at the energy consumption by sector within Kenya, um, the data I did this. I actually did this data myself. I retrieved all the information I could get, and I did all the data analysis. And over time, there has been an interesting insight into distribution of energy resources across sectors, and to kind of identify those potential disparities or areas where improvements need to be made to ensure equitable access to electricity. First, the industry sector has definitely shown an increased trend from 1990 to the recent time. They are, the biggest consumer of energy, right? And then when you
Yes.
now look at the residential sector, is consistently increasing since the 1990s, indicating that there is a higher energy usage for household needs, which is another aspect you have to consider due to population growth, urbanization, and improved living standards. And that's why I agree with what you said about, what that guy told you about, just get your passport and leave. No, I disagree, because now you're decreasing the population of a country. Because when you look at a country's population, matters a lot to its growth and development. So that's another thing about that. And then also when you look at within the commercial and public sectors, there's been a rise in energy consumption, which relatively is kind of to the industrial sector because of urbanization and expansion of services through foreign direct investments, which resulted in more electricity for businesses and like public facilities. So when I was looking at this, my analysis of this is that energy consumption in Kenya is a very interesting approach, because it now gives you an insight into where those electrification challenges are coming in, and how this impacts, the whole aspect of closing the gap on digital equity. And understanding those energy requirements, I think, is something that also our Kenyan population, our citizens, need to be educated on, and understanding the energy requirements of, how to have your farm generate, how to generate energy for your farm so you can sustain food for a whole year. Right.
Yeah.
And now, with that, I also was doing some more digging to find out the trend of electricity generation by sources for Kenya. And I have seen that over the years, from either 1990, I mostly looked the data from 1990s to kind of the recent times of what was the recently available. There was an increase in oil-based generation, but then there was a decline, because of the push to kind of have carbon free, or carbon
Yeah.
emission goals. I don't know how to properly say it right now.
Yeah.
And then it kind of stayed, relatively stable over the years. And then there was a slight decrease, and then hydroelectric power now has
Yes.
kind of increased over the years. And as a matter of fact, I learned that Ethiopia was trying to sell hydroelectric power to somebody else when they haven't. I don't know. I was confused by that. Maybe I need to read more on that, but I don't know why you would sell your source of power to another place when you're not even providing it to your own people. Um, and then also there was an aspect of that wind and solar generation has kind of increased over the past couple of years, because it's proven to show that it's clean, and then it provides a reliable way. Now the question still remains: is there's all this fluctuation on which energy source to rely on, and the aspect of nuclear energy. I definitely agree that nuclear energy is a very reliable source of energy, because there's definitely cities out there which I cannot name off the top of my head right now, because I'm consumed with so much information. I cannot remember those specific places. But
Yeah,
I definitely think a diversified energy source that provides electricity, it ensures reliability, affordability, and sustainability, which in the long run, I definitely believe closes that digital equity gap. And I think Kenya is one of the biggest users of geothermal energy,
yeah,
and it's one of the biggest electricity generations in Kenya. And given its reliability and sustainability, there's definitely been more investments in this source of energy to enhance energy access and reliability on the power supply because it benefits educational institutions and students. Because when you look at a country, you also look at the level of educational attainment, and all these things are factors into considering kind of the economic outlook of these areas. So I definitely do think diversifying the electricity generation by source for Kenya definitely will allow for achieving 100% electrification and as well minimizing those blackouts because you would have a grid system that is reliable, right? Now,
yeah,
you're living in Kenya. I live in the United States right now, right?
yeah.
What what do you think? How do you see the future of electrification evolving in Kenya, especially in terms of reaching those remote and underserved areas?
Well, we are trying, we are scrambling in our own ways, I think. Like recently, we have had a list of hydroelectric developments which aren't yet complete. Which I mean, when complete, they'll at least serve an increase in the grid supplementation. Like we had, I don't know if you've heard of the Mwache Dam project in South Coast Kwale, which it's over 5 years right now, and it's not yet complete. We had the Aurora and Kimurer, and some scandals came along the way. So we're really trying. We had the wind. We have the wind project, I think, in northeastern Garissa, if I'm not wrong. So I think the government is really trying, but there is also an issue. And one of the challenges that I forgot to mention is, you see, we did so much in a very short time span, probably out of the goodwill and the resources that were brought in together from the outside world, the local capacity and the goodwill that the government had at that particular time to see Kenya electrified all through. And now from that, I think we went into a certain comfort zone that, oh yeah, I think as a country we've done enough, so we can relax a little bit, you know, from 35% to 78%. It's not bad though. So we fail to realize that we still have untapped potential that can really see Kenya 100% electrified. And now the developmental project that we have, they don't see through the light of the day, probably because, again, of the lack of goodwill. Because, I mean, if we could move our electrification system from 35% to 78% within a span of 10 years, then I don't think we even need 5 years to move it from 78% to 100%, or even have surplus production that we can be disposing to other countries and, better our economy. But now there comes the question of, you know, we've comforted ourselves under the fact that we are still a developing countries, and we are not bad off. There's the question of corruption. Like, I know of three power projects, two hydro electric and one wind, which are at standstill as we speak, which could really contribute to the power production inclusivity in Kenya that may see us electrifying 100%. Then now comes that aspect of nuclear energy, which I don't know if anybody has really figured it out. You could be the first person to figure out that Kenya needs nuclear energy, and we really need one, because if we can have a 24-hour total blackout, including the you see, in Kenya we have, I think, only two international airports. I imagine you have a power blackout at airports. and now you don't have generator fuel to run through the whole entire airport, and people have to use storage. I was seeing some meme on how Kenya is a country of jokers, and I think I have to concur with that. We are really jokers because now imagine on an international airport, you're coming from the United States as a tourist, as a visitor, and you land in an airport where there is no electricity. You even feel totally confused, like, where am I? Am I in the? It looks like the devil's land, huh? Mhm. So I feel like we really need to invest, bringing the aspect of goodwill and formulation of policies that will work along us to see ourselves electrifying 100%. Of course, we have the potential to do 100% electrification. If we tap, if we finish the the incomplete project and tap into the nuclear energy, we can have even surplus production and we'll see us immensely grow in all aspects of life, from education. Like, you see, one of the reasons that people move from the rural to urban is because of the access to electricity as well. So if we can have 100% rural electrification, then we'll probably negate the rural urban migration, because investments of things like private schooling, big stores and supermarket can do the investment. You need power reliability, as you say, the access to power. Because when you go, I, sometimes I visit South Coast Kuala, and yes, they have the power line, school supplement and whatnot, but over there you could go for like 2 weeks without electricity, bro. Leave alone the 24 hours in Kenya and Nairobi. Over there you could go for more than 2 weeks without electricity. And you ask them why, and they tell you, we are used to that. It's like they just erected the poles and the electric wires, but there's nothing much that can be done. So there's still really, really a lot that needs to be done, in addition to the connectivity that was done probably out of good. We really need to invest in power production and supplies to see us achieving that 100% electrification. And I mean, yeah, it's possible. And we are not getting our passport ready, maybe just to move around the world and come back home and fix this country.
I definitely agree. Um, Definitely agree that we definitely need to push for collaboration in making sure we can navigate the electrification challenges in Kenya. So, we're coming here to an hour soon of having this conversation. We're gonna do another episode soon. To everybody out there listening, don't be what is it? What do they say? Don't shy out on this conversation. Please let us know what your thoughts are, y'all. And Hussein, it's definitely been amazing having you join on this conversation. And we'll definitely continue this conversation in the next couple of weeks to share kind of more information on how Kenya can navigate this aspect of ensuring we can reach 100% electricity and diversifying the grid system for energy sources. So, any last words you have to say, Hussein?
Well, I think on the subject of electrification, I have to call Kenyans to act on goodwill, because we really have the potential. In fact, I can dare say Kenya has an immense potential to even get out of that, developing country bracket. And it's not something that can be done even within a year, but there's a problem with leadership. I don't really want to dwell on leadership and governance, because we are a democratic country, really, and we give them those mandates. So it's still our problem, neither or either, depending on your approach on it. But I'd really want people to just open their mind and see what good 100% or complete electrification will come along, in terms of, economic development, technological advancement, school, access to job and employment. Right now, if you walk along the street and you ask every youth, what are the challenges you're going through as a youth? 100%, I'm sure they'll tell you lack of employment, lack of employment. So, I mean, if we could really have that 100% electrification and whatever means that we'll use to have it, and now we open up to our economy, then good for us. Now we won't be in need of traveling to the United States or Italy or Germany in search of, job just because we have electricity. In fact, those guys will be coming here because we have vast of resources, and now we are at 100% electrification. So you can go to the rural center and buy your own land and do your farming and irrigation and get your farm produce and sustain yourself. And yeah, I mean, we really need people of goodwill to fix this economy. And yeah, it takes, I believe, step by step, you're getting there.
I 100% agree. We're getting there, and we shall keep pushing for this conversation. And as you said, what you just said, when you ask the youth right now, what is one thing they say? Lack of employment. Electrification, electricity can bridge that gap. Let's just
Absolutely.
let's just end it on that. Electricity will bridge all those gaps. So, to all our listeners out there, thank y'all. We appreciate y'all. Don't forget to subscribe, reach out, and as we always say on this, pursue your dream, seize the day. Peace out.